Hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming, everyone, on a, what are we now? Thursday night? Does that sound right? Yeah, good. I'm a little bit nervous because I've been doing a lot of talks for this book, but they've all been in a Q&A format or with an interview. So I feel a bit weird just to be kind of like going wild in front of everyone with no checks or balances. So we'll see how that goes. First of all, before I start, just for context, can I get a hand up if you've read my book? Anyone? A couple. All right, good. Not many. Excellent. No spoilers, though. All right, definitely the station. So we just heard an acknowledgement, but I would like to acknowledge again the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of this land, especially because in the time my book is set, when my book is written, not when my book was written, I'm not that old. In the time I set my book in 1927 was the year in which it became illegal for Aboriginal people to be in the city centre without a permit. 1927 till I think 1953 or 4. Should have written that down on my page notes, shouldn't I? But I just think it's interesting to remember that this wonderful venue was on land that was briefly off limits to people who'd been here for 60,000 years. So something to think about. So, what is it? What's the book? There's a lot of them over there if you want to have a look. It's not a lot of choice, I'm afraid. It's mostly, it's entirely my book. So that's what it looks like. It's a bunch of pages put together into a sort of rectangular format. But it's also an audiobook now, which is pretty cool. I was very, very excited to have my book made into an audiobook, which is now on Audible. It was done by a British company, and my job was to put together a list of pronunciations of the Australian towns and specific Australian words for this poor old British guy. The guy who did it is, his main gig is doing a traveling show based on the life of the guy who wrote The Fiddler on the Roof. So he's like this lovely old British Jewish man, and I was supposed to tell him how to pronounce, like Mullawar and all these places. And I didn't, I forgot. So I haven't listened to it yet because I'm a bit nervous that it's all gonna be wrong and it'll be my fault. And I'm gonna get really angry letters from like Tenindua and
posh English accent.
yeah, you have heard it? Oh no. I heard the first sort of like page and I thought, it sounds great, I love his voice. I can't listen to the rest of it right now. I'll get there. So yeah, we call it a cozy crime. I call it a cozy crime. People call it a cozy crime. Book, I'll talk more about that later. And it's set in the Midwest, wheatbelt, goldfields kind of area, which I'll also talk more about later. And it was published by Fremantle Press, who've been wonderful. Every step of the way, I was thrilled to be working with Freo Press. Georgia Richter, who was my editor and publisher, is amazing, and very, very detail-oriented. I've been brutally making fun of her because she called me once with changes. We were sending changes to each other, and she called me, I think she was just busy doing something else, and she said, you've mentioned here that someone's walking around under a moon waxing crescent. And I've looked up September the 23rd, 1927, and the moon was not waxing crescent. So you can't say she didn't earn her money on that one. But they're doing a great job with crime as well. There's 3 other crime novels released the same time as mine, all from sort of veterans of the industry. We had Alan Carter, Dave Wish-Wilson, and Dave Warner all releasing like I think Dave Warner's was his 12th book or something. And I felt like an idiot because everyone was, they introduce us all and they're like, Dave Warner, ARIA winner and, writer of the Ned Kelly Award-winning blah, 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 and they go through these big spiels for everyone, and they're like, and this guy. His name's Alex. So yeah, that's me. Speaking of people whose name is or are Alex, that's me. I don't really have a reason to put that photo up there. I just thought I'd like to inflict it on people, and you guys are all quite captive right now. So I thought I'd just tell you a little about me. I'm from WA. I'm actually from the suburbs, even though I'm writing about the Midwest. Don't tell anyone. My mum's family's from Narrogin, so that's where all this madness took place. I'm normally a teacher, and a copywriter. I write sort of advertising stuff as well. And I just sort of, teaching and writing has taken me around the world, in a way. I lived for a while in Mexico and in the Republic of Georgia, as opposed to the US state of Georgia, and in China as well. So had a lot of fun and met a lot of interesting people, and then was glad to kind of come home, especially given how things have turned out the last couple of years. I made a good move coming home when I did. And last of all, I don't know why, but it comes up a lot. I think we put it in the promotional materials. I think they're looking for something interesting about me. But I have insomnia, which sort of comes and goes to a degree, but I'll often go about 3 or 4 nights without sleeping. And that's sometimes when I write, which is possibly explains some of the 47-word long sentences that you might find if you brave Death Leaves the Station. So I apologize for that. But I think I actually started reading cozy crime and things like that because it's cozy, when I couldn't sleep, because it's just so easy to get through, and it's nice, little warm, nourishing sort of medication almost. And I started to really, really get it in, inside my head and get into that headspace of thinking about how I could get away with the perfect crime. And I didn't want to face jail time, so I thought I'd do it in fiction form instead. So let's talk about cozy crime. A lot of people haven't really used the word or don't really understand the term, even though everyone's familiar with the actual genre itself. I think it's interesting. What makes it cozy? People talk about this cozy crime. Obviously, most of the time it's someone being killed, so it's a bit of a weird thing to call it cozy. But there are so many things about it that I'm sure, if you read Agatha Christie or if you watch Midsummer Murders or something, it's very sort of, it's very civilized in a way, in a certain kind of civilization. You don't see any, usually not a lot of sex or gore or things like that. It's usually quite, someone's killed off screen or in a kind of comical way, and then everyone's kind of busting out going, oh. And it's kind of like comfort food. I've got this idea here of comfort food. There is a wonderful podcast called the Allusionist, not Illusionist, but Allusionist. Anyone listened to Allusionist before? Heard this one? Oh, it's good. Okay, you're gonna give it a shot. There's a British woman who Helen Zaltzman, who does this podcast, and it's about words and how we use language and things like that. And she did a bit of research and asked people what kind of things they liked to read when they were sick, basically, or when they were recovering from something, or anything like that. And overwhelmingly, it was Ngaio Marsh, Agatha Christie, all of this early 20th century crime stuff. And it's just very interesting, because I thought, I felt that way, but I didn't realize so many other people did as well. It is really quite a familiar, comforting thing. Just lost my train of thought. Nah, it's gone. Oh well. Moving on. But I did have a little caveat here. For whom is it comforting? Because when you are reading things like that, of course, they're written in the 20s, 30s. I mean, if you go, to Sherlock Holmes and other things, you get back into the late 1800s as well. So obviously, you've got a lot of opinions and attitudes and words that are not acceptable nowadays. And I found that when I started talking about this and thinking of this as comfort food and comfort literature, I really did have to stop and think, well, who is this comfortable for? And I thought, it's comfortable for me, because I'm a white man, and everything's comfortable for me, because that's how we made the world, apparently. But you'll turn the page, all of a sudden, and just kind of get the wind knocked out of you by just like a brutal racial slur, or just horrible, something that just says something absolutely horrible about women or, homosexual people or anything. There'll be just this, you write right into the story, and all of a sudden it goes, oh, and takes the wind out of you. So I think that's something to be aware of, that we all kind of do lionize and idolize in this genre that I'm writing anyway. We all sort of go, oh, Agatha Christie, the Queen of Crime. But you forget that her best-selling book, which now is called And Then There Were None, originally had the N-word in the title. And yeah, it was just very, very prevalent. So I did try and bear that in mind when I was writing, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. One of the things I love about cozy crime, though, in this genre, is that it's all about a puzzle. It's like, I love doing crosswords, and I love just any kind of, mental exercise, I suppose, in that way. And it is. We're all sort of racing against the clock almost when you're reading the book to try and figure it out. And I don't know about you, but I never get there. I've probably had 1 or 2 books that I've read that I've guessed it. Or I've guessed something, something's up with that person and I don't trust them. But very rarely have I got to the end and gone, that's exactly what I was thinking would happen. Especially with the good ones. Of course you get some of them that are not so refined. But I think we love that. I think a lot of people really, really enjoy this this genre that it's literature, so it's about people and it's about relationships and everything, but also at its core, it's very much a little puzzle to play with and solve. I call it conventionally attractive because I love the conventions of the genre. And when I say the conventions, I mean, if you see a book, even if you haven't read the author before, you see a book that has that font and that cover and that, it has death in the title or murder in the title. They did make me do that, actually, Freya Press. I had a different title and they were like, we want murder in the title. And I was like, oh, it's so... And then I was like, okay, I'll have death in the title. That's my compromise. Artistic integrity. But I actually really do love the title, Death Leave the Station. I think it's quite fun. So yeah, conventions. You see that book, you hear the title, and you kind of know that it's going to be, there'll be like an eccentric sort of amateur detective. There'll be some weird convoluted crime that happens, and then usually in a closed environment, and then there'll be slow release of clues, and then eventually everyone's gathered around, the fire in the drawing room and going, and you, and then they'll kind of pivot, and it was you, and you're like, yes, I knew that was going to happen, but it's still good, love it. So yeah, I think of it as a conventionally attractive in that its conventions attract me. So having those conventions or those, those cliches, really, let's be honest, I think makes it really, really fun to mess with, to subvert the expectations. So I think the best writers do that. My favourite one's probably Josephine Tay, who was a Scottish writer around the same time, and she did some really bizarre, unexpected stuff with it. There's one where the murder is in a queue of people waiting to go and see to see like a West End show, and no one really can see because everyone's so packed and jostling that no one knows who's done it. And there's one where the Daughter of Time, where the main character has fallen and broken his leg, like the detective, who's a detective doing normal detective things and detectiving around. In other novels, he falls and breaks his leg, and then this entire book he's in hospital and can't move, so he has to get everyone to bring books and materials to him and kind of solve it from the hospital bed. So having these expectations, having these things we know are going to happen, makes it all the more fun when you can just be like, and upend it or try something different. And I like to think that's what I did. I like to think a lot of things that aren't true, but I like to think that's what I do in my book. Another thing that's great about this is that it's unreal, but not fantastic. And by that I mean, you don't have dragons, you don't have like people falling from 30-story buildings and jumping up again like you do in a lot of action films and stuff like that. But it is very unreal. I think part of what makes it cozy is that these people are all usually rich, and they have, in that era, they have like, manservants and things like this. Manservants? What, you have one manservant, you have men's servants? Man's servant, like Governors General? All right. Anyway, they have them. They have they have servants looking after them, and they so they're not worried about money. They're not worried about if they've eaten or not. They can always just jump in somewhere and someone's, I've got a spot of lunch on there. Just grab your ham sandwich, old boy. And there's just so little of that real world stress there. Even the timing, I've been noticing, someone pointed this out to me, I've been noticing the timing. People are doing all their sort of conversations and all their drinking clubs and their clue reveals. It's all happening at 2 a.m. Like they always, it's always like midnight and they jump in a hansom cab and zip across London. You're going, what are you doing getting a cab and going in to have tea at midnight on a Tuesday? So it's got this unreality of just, it doesn't have the edges, I think, of real life, which is nice. Another thing which is interesting about cozy, which I try to be aware of, is that it is pioneered by women. We had, I've got another mental slip here, but a lot of the very, very early sort of, talking 1800s literature was pioneered by women. But then obviously the really big, the four queens of crime, as they call them, obviously with Agatha Christie and Ngaio Marsh and so on, were women. And I think, if I'm not correct about this, you will go in and cut this out, I assume, and put in a retraction and a full disclaimer. I think it was the first time that female novelists, female writers, were consistently outselling male writers, because obviously until then it was a very, very male-dominated area, but these guys were so good at it that it was just, it just became a women's domain. So I try and be a bit aware of that and remember that I'm not, that I'm sort of, standing on the shoulders of she-giants when I write. And another interesting thing about that is that I put staunch support here because of the Staunch Prize, which some people may have heard of and some people may not. One of the things that does happen in this, which makes it quite different from a lot of crime and a lot of, mystery and horror and that kind of stuff, and detective stories, is that there's not a lot of violence against women. A kind of quite common trope, obviously, when you watch crime TV shows or murder, is a young woman battered to death or strangled or sexually assaulted or whatever. But in this, you often have like an old retired colonel who's done something horrible in India and it's caught up with him, or you have a sort of an overweight public servant or something like that. You often have this sort of quite diversity of victims. It's not always just a young woman getting assaulted and killed. So there's a thing called the Staunch Prize, which is basically a prize for books that don't use violence against women as the plot point, which I thought was very interesting. And of course, it's very reflective of a lot of the winners and a lot of the nominated, shortlisted books are in this sort of similar genre. So that's, when people ask, what do you write or what's your book about, I usually say cozy crime, and I go and talk, don't shut up for 25 minutes like I just did then. And I've got so many friends and people love me. But the other thing, of course, about this one is that it is historical. It's a historical fiction one, which is good and bad. People often say, people often go one of two ways. They go, oh, great, historical fiction, that must have been a lot of fun, that must have been easy. Or they go, my God, how long did you spend researching? And it is great in some ways, and it's a bit tedious in other ways. I do have a bit of trouble writing and kind of, stopping and thinking about which words were in use then. Often you'll go to write something that feels natural and you go, hang on, no, people didn't say that, or, have to spend quite a lot of time doing your groundwork and research. But the best thing about it, especially if you're writing in crime, and if you read other people who are doing crime and mystery in 2020 and 2021, is you don't have to think about the internet, which is amazing. Because everyone else, a body goes missing. What about their smartwatch? That'll track them. What about their phone? What about, wouldn't they have clocked cell towers as they went this way? Not in 1927. So I actually quite like that. Writing in the past is great just because it makes everything so much easier. So glad I did that. And of course, we've got wonderful things like Trove, which is the National Library of Australia's digitized, archive project, I suppose. And they've got free to read all of the newspapers and all of the public domain stuff from years and years back. So when I was writing this, I spent so much more time reading newspapers from 1927 than I did reading newspapers from 2017 or 18 or whenever it was that I was writing this, which is probably not good. But I did learn a lot of interesting stuff about 1927. One of the things which is that we had so many newspapers back then. Obviously because we needed them more. We didn't have we didn't have the internet, we didn't have as much phone access or wireless and stuff like that. So everything was done through newspapers, and there's just so many. I'm looking through them and I'm going, wow. And I now have a favorite newspaper from 1927. It's a Truth. Thanks for asking. Thanks for showing an interest. But you look at it now, and we've got the West and Sunday Times on Sundays. A bit like, wish we had a bit more diversity there. And one of the reasons, of course, I did choose to go in 1927 was because my grandpa was born in 1926, so his experiences are a bit later. But he grew up in this area. He grew up in Mullawa and Mount Magnet, Tanindua, all these. I think he went down to Walcatcham, all of these places that I didn't write in my document of place name pronunciations. So we'll see how Saul Reichlin did with them. But he was an interesting guy. In that he just did so many different things. He did a lot of things, and many of them were good and many of them were not good. He was not a nice man in many ways as well, but family, you got to try. And he got me to help him write his memoirs down about 10 years ago. He basically had the notes and I was just typing away. And he had all these stories and I was going, oh my God, this is, I guess when I was thinking about, I don't know, when I was thinking about Dongara in 1930s, I was thinking, it's a small town, it's rural WA, it's going to be dead quiet, it's going to be boring, it's going to be all the, 40 carbon copies of the same old white man squinting into the sun with a hat. But he had so many fascinating stories about just all kinds of stuff going on. People had to make their own fun, I suppose, so there were all sorts of people a couple of people died trying to dig a swimming pool for one of the towns he was in because they just dug straight down and then it collapsed on them. Why am I smiling? No. It was funny at the time. He learnt how to catch crayfish from like an old Chinese guy. He was, in with all of these people from Afghanistan, bringing camels across. Like, it was just a really, really unexpectedly sort of larger than life thing. And some of the things I think were fake. He did tell me that he caught an emu by the neck when he was 12 because he ran out of bullets. So he was 12 years old, on the back of a horse, shooting at an emu, ran out of bullets, grabbed it by the neck, and killed it by pushing its head down onto a barbed wire fence as he ran along. And I don't know about you, but I find that a bit hard to believe. Because to remind you of what a 12-year-old looks like, that's what we're looking at. So, I don't know. Not sold, but we'll see. So yeah, obviously that was an inspiration. It was very, very interesting. I actually didn't really take a lot from his stories other than the setting, but I just thought it would be an interesting place to set a... Actually, there's one thing I took, but I can't tell you because it's a spoiler. Actually, no, there are two things, and I can tell you one of them. One of them is he met and sort of had a little bit to do with Father Jerome Hawes, who built, you might have heard, built the Geraldton Cathedral and built the Priest House and a lot of those. He was a kind of wandering former, I guess still architect. He trained as an architect and then converted to Catholicism and then became a priest and travelled around. And of course that was partly inspiration for my detective in this book, my amateur detective, who is a former friar. He's a lapsed Catholic mendicant friar, which means he lives by begging. And he has given away everything, all of his possessions, including his name. So he's this kind of nameless, weird little dude who just rocks up in the middle of the desert and says, "Can I have a cup of tea?" And people usually say yes because he's endearing. I like to think he's endearing. So yeah, that's part of why I wrote in the past, I suppose, and what writing in the past means to me and where it came from. Now, the other part of writing in the past is, trying to represent what I was saying earlier about, Indigenous people being forbidden from the city centre and all this sort of obviously widespread discrimination and aggression and sexism and all this sort of stuff. Because you don't really want to write about that. It's not very fun. The goal of my book was to be comforting and fun and enjoyable, and it's not really fun to be like, this person hates this other person because. So it is hard to strike a balance between making everyone love each other and making it, but this person's different. Everyone else back then thought it was a good idea to have the death penalty for homosexuality, but he doesn't because he's a just jolly old guy. And between, that on one side, and then the other side, of course, being your Quentin Tarantino, like, I just love showing racial violence, yeah, which I also didn't really feel like would be fun. So it was difficult, and I had to talk to, I was not sure, first of all, I'm not sure if I achieved that balance. I've had people say it's great. I've had people say it's too, it doesn't go far enough in showing how people are horrible, and I've had people say it goes too far, so I don't really know if I succeeded, but I did have some help, so people at Freo Press and friends in the writing community, people of colour and things like that. I did have a lot of consultation and a lot of research with the, especially with Trove. So that was an interesting point that I think a lot of people who are writing historical fiction probably have to have to contend with and think about. A lot of people ask me about the writing and publishing process in general, and what it's like, because this is my first book. Sorry, I didn't know if I said that. This is the first book that I've had published, and normally I write just marketing copy. So normally I'm writing about like floor surfacing stuff or like dust suppression systems, or because that's what happens when you're a copywriter in WA. It's all mining stuff. So it's like, yeah, fleet hire and labour solutions. It's all good. So this is the first book I've had published, and not the first book I've written though. And I'm sure anyone who writes or has tried writing or even thought about it has the horrible, what David Zindel called the nameless awful novel, just tucked away, hiding somewhere. And I've got a couple of them. I do have a couple of novel-length stories that are just furiously bad. And I'm hoping one day I'm confident enough in my skills to pull out some furiously bad writing and just and read a passage and try and make it through without laughing. But that's fine, because I like to think if the goal of writing is having fun, if you're writing to to stroke your ego or to get rich, or all those rich writers, or anything like that, then there's so much scope for being disappointed. But if you're writing because you like writing, if you're writing to have fun, if you're writing to just give it a shot, then what does it matter if it sits on your hard drive and is only opened once every couple of years for you to laugh and or cry and then put it away again? I think that's great, and I do get a lot of joy out of reading my old attempts, I'll say. So I was very excited though when I got accepted. Hooray! I just submitted straight. A lot of people ask, did you go through an agent? Do you submit for a competition, like my friend Rebecca Higgy, who won the Fogarty Award? A lot of people do it that way. They had an open digital submissions thing going at Fremantle Press, as publishing houses often do. They'll regularly just say, look, we're looking for blank at the moment. And when I checked, they just happened to say we were looking for crime. And I was like, oh, I got one of them. So I put it in, and they said, we'll get back to you within 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I didn't hear anything. And after 8 weeks, I didn't hear anything. And I just kind of forgot about it. And then about probably 12 weeks later, I was driving to work, and I got a call, and they said, hi, yeah, okay, we'll publish it. And I went, what? And I nearly crashed my car, and it was amazing. Yay! So yeah, it's different for everyone. I've heard, especially since having it published, I didn't talk to a lot of other writers before because I guess I felt embarrassed or something. But talking to everyone now, and the variety of stories is just everything. Everything from talking to people who were just well known and popular for something else, and people were like, when are you going to write a book so I can publish it? Before they'd even thought about writing something. To people who wrote and tried for 12 years, 20 years, 30 years to get something published, and then finally got there. Or people who are still trying. It's all it's all part of the process, I suppose. And then the other thing that's part of the process, of course, is after you've got it selected, you think, yes, they love me, they love what I do, and they go, yeah, we do, but let's take out 184 semicolons, because my idea of a sentence is not the same as everyone else's idea of a sentence. So most of my drafting process was just cutting sentences from one big one into about 4 little ones. But it was really good, actually. I thought I would be nervous. I thought I'd be, it'd be hard to have someone reading. Well, it was hard to have someone reading something personal to me after writing, mind site copy. But it was nice. It was really pleasant, and especially Georgia is just an amazing editor. She was very, very supportive and very, if something was great, she would say it was great. If something was not great, she would very politely and with great charm and humour go, "What if this didn't suck so much? I want you to imagine a world in which this sentence doesn't make me want to vomit." No, she'd never say that. So yeah, I actually found that quite nice, and I think I learned a lot from it. I'm writing a second one now, and I feel a lot of I kind of have that internalized, a bit of that, very small amount of that internalized editorial voice now going, Is that the best way to go? And yeah, it's nice. And then, of course, after comes this, the promotional stuff. So this was published in, I want to say November 2020. And of course, it was COVID time. So we didn't do a lot of the things that we were going to do. We didn't do a big book launch or even a small face-to-face book launch. We did one sort of larger Freo Press event where we all launched a bunch of books at once to keep it contained. But I've really only just now started doing things like this. And as I said before, this is the first time I've done this. So, hey. But this week I've got 6 different events, if you count talking on the phone to someone on the radio. So it was nothing for a long time. And I was going, has anyone read my book? Does anyone care? And then I've got this one week where I just haven't really slept more than I've slept less than I normally do, which is saying something. But it's been amazing. The whole thing has been very, very enjoyable. And one of the best things about it has just been getting to meet so many people who are readers and writers and just interested, I suppose. And I've learnt so much and enjoyed so much just talking to other people in the industry and around and people who care. It's been very, very nice. Also, I get a lot of people from towns that I mentioned once in the book, which is quite nice. I get people going, I've got, I keep forgetting the name of this one town. No, it'll come to me. Anyway, like Three Springs or something, and they go, oh, I'm from Three Springs, or my cousin lives in Three Springs, and I'm like, sick. Because I've never been there. I've been to Geraldton twice. I've been to Mullewa once and Dongara once, and that's where a lot of the book takes place. And I feel a bit like a fraud saying that. But hey, look, no one here has been to 1927, so yeah. No, as I said, a lot of my childhood I was in the wheatbelt, but I was down south in Narrogin, so I got a feel for the heat up north, and I went, okay, I guess this Narrogin, but warmer, which is a massive simplification. I'm so sorry to everyone from the Midwest. People often, when I ask, what should I talk about in these events, people say, can you give us some hot tips for writing? And I don't have hot tips, but I've got some room temperature tips. And these are for, again, any kind of writing, any kind of creativity, really, because, as I said, I usually write boring stuff. So my first one is just to read, because I feel like reading, the more you read, the more you understand what a sentence looks like, what a clause feels like, how the grammar and the vocabulary and the rhythm just become second nature the more you expose yourself to it. But the other thing is to read widely, I think. I mean, I obviously am writing in this genre now, but it's not what I used to love, and it's not what I always read either. When I was a kid, I used to only read sort of like fiction and like science fiction and fantasy. I went through a phase of only reading non-fiction. Obviously, I read a lot of brochures about mine sites in my day-to-day life, which I hope doesn't inform my prose too much. Another one, a bit more of a practical one, I suppose, is that most people, I assume, are now writing on computers, on laptops. And one thing that really changed the way I write was that I started, instead of having a document that I opened and wrote in and saved and closed and then did the same thing again, I decided every time I was going to start a new day of writing, I would save it as a new version of that document with that day's date. Which means that old kill your darling, people always say murder your darlings, kill your darlings, get rid of stuff that doesn't work. And I hate that because I love writing, and I wrote this. I've spent 20 minutes on this paragraph describing a single leaf that's way too overwrought and doesn't add anything to the story. But I don't want to get rid of it because I worked hard on it. So I would always be really, really reluctant to actually just take a bit and go, that doesn't work, I'm going to get rid of it. But if you just open up your old document, save it as with today's date, then you can get rid of it, and you can always say, hey, look, if I really need that 3-paragraph description of a leaf, I can find it in yesterday's version of the document. And you never do. You never need that description of a leaf. You never go back to it. But it's nice knowing that you can. So I found that frees me up a lot to just get rid of stuff. The other thing I do is I read to myself, because no one else will let me read to them. I read aloud because I think that language, I feel fairly confident in the knowledge that language evolved orally, and writing came later as a way to try and, kind of pale imitation of that, really. So when we write, we're trying to imitate, especially when you're writing dialogue, you're trying to imitate the prosody and the actual rhythm of natural speech. So you should be speaking it. And I don't sit there going, and then he went to the. We will just kind of run it over in my head. I'll usually read a paragraph and then go back and check it. Sometimes I don't, but particularly if it's something important or a key piece of action, I'll go and read it a few times and maybe read it aloud, try a different accent just for fun. Hey, I think that really helps because you can tell something will catch and you go, that doesn't sound right. And if it doesn't sound right when you read it aloud, it probably will catch when people are reading as well. When I say move around, a lot of the stuff comes to me when I'm walking. I'll often go, I've been sitting here for an hour trying to, write this one scene or this one piece of action, and it's just not working for me. Something's not right. And if I go and walk the dog, or if I, just forget about it, and the next day I'm walking to work or something, I find often when I'm just moving, it's like it powers the gears in my brain. I go, suddenly I'll figure it out, and then I'll quickly note it down, or just try and remember it, or do like a kind of garbled, indecipherable voice app on my phone that I never listen to. Every now and then I'll accidentally play one when I'm scrolling through things, and I'll just be like, he was in the cupboard, and then traffic noises, straw man. You're going, what? So yeah, move around, but also just try different positions. Like I feel. Right on my laptop, I'm lying on my stomach on the floor, I'm kind of like over here on this table. It just, different things work in a different way. Having said that, I've said that to one of my friends who writes, and she said, God, absolutely not. I have to be in the same place every time. I have to have the same music and the same, so I guess whatever works for you. And the last one, of course, I guess with everything is to set a goal and try and figure out what you want to do for that day or for that week or for that month or in general. And then just don't worry when you don't do it. Which I almost never do. It took me a while to write this one. It's a very short book, but it took me a few years. I'm hoping the next one will be quicker. And the last one, I guess, because we're in a library, I like to think, I love this library, by the way. I love the new City of Perth Library. I was so excited when it was coming, and I was so excited. I bring my students here when I'm teaching English as a second language down in West Perth. I bring them here, and I'm like, look, library, go and give them a little scavenger hunt, go and find this on the second floor, and they go, because they're teenagers. And I think about it as the tower of, like, that Leonard Cohen song, The Tower of Song? I think you have like the tower of book. Doesn't sound as good. I'm not a songwriter, what? Anyway, I think books are really important. I think we should promote them. I think we should read them. I think we should give them to people as gifts. I try and do it all the time. Because to me, books are empathy in print. The more that you read from someone else's point of view, the more you understand, maybe not that person exactly or that type of people exactly, but you just understand what it's like to see the world through someone else's eyes and to experience something that isn't you and isn't your kind of worn-in responses to things and attitudes and so on. For me, especially, I've got big-time anxiety, related to the insomnia, of course. And to me, certain books are such good anxiety fighters. Of course, there's ones that just make you. I had an event before with Sophie McNeil from the ABC foreign correspondent, who's just written "We Can't Say We Didn't Know" about the Syrian civil war. That one's not such an anxiety fighter. That one's heavy. It's amazing, but I have to read a chapter and then go and read 2 other novels and come back and read a chapter. So I'm getting there. In general, I find books are anxiety fighters. Can't sleep. Read a book, not sure about how to do something, read a book, something will come to you. Love it. And the last of all, I sort of wanted to end on this idea of, I think of books as profound, not profound as you put Pink Floyd on when you're 16 and go what if the colours I see are not the same as the colours you see, kind of way. But more just that they go into things in depth in a way that we don't so much anymore. At least my generation often tend not to. This is the longest I've not had my phone in my hand for 5 years. And of course, we're flicking through and things like Twitter and Facebook. Remember Facebook before it suddenly took down all its pages about 3 hours ago? All these things are designed to be looked at so quickly and processed quickly and then kind of forgotten quickly. I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen something on Twitter or Instagram and gone, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. I will never forget. And I can't remember any of them right now. Whereas books, of course, you spend time with it. You hold it, you have it in your bag, you get your finger grease all over it, and I find that you really do, whether, even if it's not a non-fiction book, you get into a subject, you get into a place or a person in a way that we don't usually anymore. So I think that's a really, really important thing for me. Personally, that's what I believe. And then that's all I got for you. So if you have any questions, please throw them in my direction. Yes, mystery woman, who I've never met before.
Does your second book have the same characters as the first? Or is it completely different?
Just one. So just the friar, the nameless old mate. I wasn't going to do another one, but a couple of people have asked me to, and sort of, and Freer Press think it's a good idea as well. So I'm trying another one, which is going to be, as I said, it'll keep him. Everyone else is out of it. Him moving down further south in Whodunit this time, which I've been to 3 times. So get ready. Get ready. And it's a locked room one. I'm trying. I wanted to keep in that genre, and I do love a locked room, mystery where someone's shot in a room that's locked from the inside, and killer's vanished, and they don't know how it got out. He or she, or it, or they, got out of the locked room. So that'll be pretty cool. I hope. I haven't finished it yet. I hope it'll be cool. Anyone else? Hi.
What was your, if you're able to say, what was your original title going to be?
My original title was going to be The Stone Pillow, because of, was that a spoiler? No, it's like the second chapter. Because of the way the person is killed, the main sort of mystery body guy. I'm a writer, erudite man that I am. Is found sort of dead with his head on a rock in the ground. So I thought the stone pillow. But we thought that because there are a lot of, it does mention the prohibited Perth zone ban and a lot of, suffering of Indigenous people. We thought that it might recall like the idea of smoothing the dying pillow that Daisy Bates sort of said. So we decided to go for that. And also they wanted death or murder in the title. And the stone pillow could be anything. Yeah.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I don't know. Because I wrote it so erratically. It took, in time, it took, from when I sat down and said, I'm going to start writing a book, it took about 2 years. But I was traveling, when I started writing, I was in Georgia, and I was, there were months where I didn't write anything, and then there were weeks where I had no school and I would sit down and write for, whole days at a time. So it's kind of hard to say in terms of how long I actually was writing, but yeah, from when I said I'm going to do this to when I gave it to someone and said, what do you think of this story I wrote, was about 2 years.
So are you finding this second book you're working on easier?
Yes and no. I'm finding it a lot easier in the sense that I kind of think, well, if I've done it before and people seem to like what I was doing before, then I should probably trust that a bit more and just go with it. But then I also have expectation now because a lot of people have said, I really liked this book, I want to see that again. And I'm going, oh no, what if I can't do it again? What if I do the wrong thing? So I kind of vacillate. But it's been a lot faster, definitely. I don't know if that means it's any good. Maybe I'm just writing worse. But I started working on the second one, I don't know, like August last year, and I'd say I'm probably 3/4 done. So it's a bit, it's been a bit fast. But also I had the lockdown, that helped. So yeah, next time if anyone wants to throw another pandemic my way, I'll get another book done. Thanks. Oh, sorry. No, but we're thinking we would go with the death verbs the noun thing for the series. It was George's idea. So we've got Death at the Station, so it's a locked room one, so maybe death locks the door or something like that. We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. I don't feel that attached to the title. I guess because of this one, I didn't really have a title for this one when I finished it, so I feel it'll work out. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. What was your original idea that got you sort of started? What couple of connections did you make?
Okay, so I think the original idea was a house. I used to live in Quarry Street in Freo with some friends in a horribly dirty house because of us. It wasn't dirty before we got there. And it's actually about that's not true. It's about 20 metres down from Freo Press office, which is also in Quarry Street, so that's quite nice. But it was hot, it was summer, and I was thinking, this house is so unfit for Australia. This is such an English house that someone's taken and gone, this looked nice in, Yorkshire, and then put it in Freo where it's bloody hot in summer and it was freezing in winter and I hated it. No, I loved it, but I hated being really hot and really cold. And so I had this image of, the great British country house is where so many of these things are set. Like it's so often people go away for a weekend at Chimneys or wherever it is, and that's where they're killed. So I thought, I'll take that, and I'll do what they've done. They've taken this really British thing and they've put it somewhere hot, and I'll do the same thing. I'll take a really British genre and plonk it in, not in the outback, but close to the outback. So I think that was my original idea. And then I went, oh, hey. And then I remembered Grandpa's stuff. And then I thought, well, I've been trying all these, I'll give it a shot. And it got there. Anyone else? I don't know. Sorry. I should know. I don't know, and I don't know anything about sales either. It's been out for about 5 months now, and I don't know how many it's sold. I keep on forgetting to ask. I'm a bit nervous to ask as well, so... I know my mum has bought so many. She gave them to everyone I know for Christmas, everyone she knows for Christmas. She just keeps, and she bought a couple accidentally, because she, she'll try and put them in bookshops. She'll kind of display them, and then one of them she couldn't see it, so she went to a bookshop. I think it was in Cottesloe, and she said, I can't see Death Leaves the Station by this amazing, local writer, Alexander Thorpe. He was in the newspaper on the weekend. Didn't you see him in the West? And they're like, oh, sorry. Oh, it's here. And they kind of gave it to her and took it up to the counter and put it there. So she's like, oh. So she just felt like she had to buy it then. So she kind of came over to my house and was like, I bought another one. I was like, come on. No one else is going to buy them if you buy them all. So, based on my mum alone, I've sold, at least 40. And now I have no inheritance, so that's good. Or I have an inheritance of books. Yeah, sorry. Any last question?
Did you have a favourite character that you really enjoyed writing for or enjoyed developing as you went along?
I did. The detective. So we've got the that old formula of the actual smart kind of amateur detective, and you often have a Poirot or whatever, and then you have often the local police who sort of get in their way. And in this one, he's called Arnold Parks, and he's this stuffy old guy with a horrible moustache who's just really kind of self-important and very, he doesn't like anything that's happening. And it's so fun to write Bust. It's just, Bastard's a great fun to write. And everyone else, there's there's a kind of a coming of age story for the main character who's actually an 18-year-old girl who hasn't been off the station in a while, who discovers the body. I didn't actually give my blurb. Anyway, you'll see it. So everyone else has to have this warmth, and they have to have this, the friar comes out of nowhere, so he has to be a bit charming, and everyone else needs to have some presence. And so I put all my bastardry into this one guy, and it's just so fun. So good. You can go.
Thank you,
Hi.
everybody.